Hej og velkommen tilbage til Økonomichefen her fra The Crib of Daniels Pengetips. I den her video der skal vi reagere på finans-youtuberen Andrei Jikh. Han er en af de største i verden, og han vil fortælle os, hvordan han har tænkt sig at investere sine penge i 2022. Så det bliver jo rigtig spændende, og jeg kan allerede afsløre for jer, at vi har lavet reaktionsdelen, før vi optog introen, og der er altså rigtig meget god information i de her videoer også. Så der er både noget at lære, og der er også måske lidt trylleri undervejs. Det er jo det er han jo kendt for at være god til at trylle med penge.
Ja, Andrews videoer er altid meget kreativ, underholdende og ikke mindst lærerige. Og det er altså spændende at høre, hvordan han investerer både i aktier og kryptoer og boligmarkedet, som vi jo kommer til at høre i den her video.
Og det vi har gjort, det er, at vi har lavet en reaktion på Graham Stephanos, nok den allerstørste finans-youtuber, over på Daniels kanal. Så giv den her video et like, hvis den er underholdende, og så bagefter så er du meget velkommen til at se den anden video.
Og giv den et like også. Se den eventuelt også. Der er i hvert fald masser af gode tips i begge videoer. Så er vi klar til at se på din bror, din inspirationskilde.
Ja, det er Andrei Jikh. Det er faktisk en af de kanaler, der inspirerede mig mest til at gå i gang med at lave Økonomichefen. Simpelthen fordi han kommer fra en kreativ baggrund, så godt nok med tryllekunst, og har begivet sig ind i den her finansverden. Så tænkte jeg, jamen det kunne være, det også var noget for mig.
Og jeg venter stadigvæk spændt på, hvornår vi ser tryllekunsten over på Økonomichefen. Men
det kan være, det kommer en dag.
Det kan være, vi kan lære noget i dag i hvert fald. Nu skal vi se på, hvordan at Andrei han investerer i 2022. Og det kan være, vi kan lære nogle tips. Det kan være, I kan lære nogle tips. Jeg er lidt spændt. Jeg ved, at Andrei investerer meget i udbytteaktier og i kryptovalutaer, så man ikke kan fortsætte med det. Men det kan også være, at der er nogle andre tips eller nogle nye investeringer, som man kommer til at afsløre. Og det er det, vi skal se på den her video.
Indtil videre ser det i hvert fald ud på thumbnailen, at han kan trække penge direkte ud af sin computer.
Wow, det glæder jeg mig til at se.
Han har en pengeprinter.
Det kan være, at kan jeg gøre det her også? Hvis jeg trækker ud af computeren. Wow.
Det kan være, han er din bror.
Welcome to a brand new year, time to set some goals and miserably fail most of them. I'm only half kidding. So one of my New Year's resolutions this year is to learn how to juggle playing cards. Whoa, that's not bad. That took me like 15,000 takes. I'm really proud of that. In today's video, I want to share with you my millionaire investing strategy for the year 2020.
Millionær Investing Strategy for 2022.
Altså betyder det så, at han er en millionær, der investerer med den strategi?
Altså han er en millionær, der investerer med den strategi i år 2022.
Ja, fordi det
Millionær Investing Strategy for 2022.
Jeg ville ønske, at det var en How to Become a Millionaire Investing Strategy.
Jeg tror, det er jo hans.
Ja, det er nok bare hans.
I'll share with you what I think will happen to stocks, real estate, and crypto. Whatever you do, please don't watch this video for financial advice because I will probably end up being wrong, just like I was wrong about thinking Bitcoin would hit $100,000. I really thought it would have last year, but it didn't, so I want to address some of those failures in today's video. It'll be really fun to reference back to this video and say, wow, he got everything right. He should really sell an investing course. I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to sell you anything. All of the information in this video is completely free. All that I ask is that you smash the like button and please don't skip the ads. Let's get right into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well.
Jeg vil så lige sige, alt er completely free, men han har disclosed, hvor meget han tjener på YouTube, og det er sådan noget med, at han tjener millioner af dollars på ad revenue og referrals på de her aktiehjemmesider, så han tjener helt sikkert masser af penge på at lave de her videoer, selvom at de er gratis for os at se.
The finance and stay for the cool new card tricks. What's up? I'm just kidding. So first, before we get into the market prediction, like a good magician, we have to get inside of the subconsciousness of the economy itself. Now, the real reason this is important is because I just wanted to show you a cool card trick. But other than that, I think it's a really cool technique to understand how investors think. Now, in economics, there's this really cool concept called the Cantelon Effect. In the 18th century, a French philosopher named Richard Cantelon published his essay on economic theory, where he noticed something really interesting. He noticed that the closer you were to power, the more you stood to benefit. In other words, if you knew rich people directly, specifically the king, then you made the most money. He also noticed that anytime there was a creation or a distribution of new money, which in that era was the discovery of a gold mine because gold was the monetary standard, that it affected people in a special way and that it was disproportionate. So a really good example is an example from Sahil Bloom, who said, imagine you're living on a tiny little island, and then all of a sudden at your doorstep shows up $1 million. Awesome. Most people are gonna take that money and they're going to buy themselves a new house, a new car, some clothing, a fancy watch. You get the idea. Now you would be able to buy those things at a fair market value because the island has no idea that you just got $1 million out of nowhere. But even though now that you've distributed that money to the merchants and the people who made those things, even though now everyone has more money on the island, those people's experience is very different than your own, because now everyone knows that they have more money. And this creates demand. Everyone wants to buy stuff. But the supply side of things still hasn't had time to catch up with how much money everyone has. And this means the price of everything has to go up, and that is inflation. So how that translates to modern economic theory is that anytime our government creates more money, like it has since March 2020, where all in we've created something like $13 trillion, it's the people at the top that are the real winners. The banks, the hedge funds, and the politicians who are able to invest their money first at market values to stay ahead of that inflation curve to benefit their own wallet.
Ja, så man kan sige, det er jo faktisk en virkelig god pointe det her med at forstå inflation på den måde, at hvis alle på den her ø, de pludselig får fat i flere penge, så de er jo på den her lille ø, så de ting de laver, der er stadigvæk den samme mængde ting og den samme mængde mennesker, men nu har alle bare fået fat i flere penge. Og ham, der fik det på sit doorstep, det er jo fordi Fed printer penge, de her $13 trillion. Det svarer lidt til at finde dem på sit doorstep, fordi de kommer lidt ud af ingenting. Og det får priserne til at stige, når der er den samme efterspørgsel, eller når der er det samme udbud, men en højere efterspørgsel, fordi folk har højere købekraft. Så en rigtig fin måde at forstå inflation på.
Ja, og det kan jo sagtens bare udvides til større områder. Det gælder ikke kun på små øer, det gælder også i USA eller andre dele af verden.
Og det er jo sådan sjovt med penge, det her med, at det er nemmere. Han starter med at tale om det her med proximity to power. Altså, hvis man er tæt på nogen, der har penge, så er det nemmere også selv at få fat i penge. Der er nok en grund til, at jeg begyndte at blive så rig efter at lære dig at kende. Det er simpelthen bare spiralet ud af kontrol. Det er
netværk skal man ikke undervurdere.
Nej, det skal man godt nok ikke. Der er et eller andet med, at forestil dig, at alle mennesker de får 1 krone. Og det man så kan gøre, det er, at man kan gå hen til andre, og så kan man udfordre dem i platterkronen. Og den, der så gætter rigtigt, får den andens 1 krone. Hvis man taber, så har man 0 kroner, og så kan man ikke spille med længere. Men hvis man vinder, så har man pludselig 2 kroner, og så har man 2 chancer, før man ikke kan spille med længere. Og det vil sige, jo flere penge man har fået fat i, jo flere chancer har man for at spille i overført betydning. Og på et eller andet tidspunkt, hvis alle bliver ved med at spille tilpas længe, så ender alle 1 kronerne hos 1 person. Og alle andre har 0. Og det er også en fin analogi til at forstå, hvorfor at rigdom akkumulerer sig få steder. Det er simpelthen fordi, at jo mindre man har, jo mindre er man i stand til at spille med. Det er bare nemmere at tjene penge, hvis man allerede har 100 millioner, man kan smide i aktier for eksempel, end hvis man skal til at først at tjene pengene for at kunne spille.
Ja.
Så
jo flere penge man har, jo lettere bliver det også at tjene flere penge. Ja. Jo flere muligheder kan man byde ind på.
Also why we see politicians have a really impressive track record of picking just the right stocks at just the right time, because they are the closest to power, so they benefit first and the most. That is the Cantelon Effect, and it's also one of the reasons why I think in 2022 we'll still see inflation, because there's a delay between creating money and seeing that reflect in the economy. But it doesn't mean that we can't benefit too. So with all that said, let me share with you what I think will happen to all the assets in 2022. When it comes to the stock market, here's what's really interesting. In order for investors to stay ahead of the inflation curve, they have to look for higher yielding assets. So for example, if you keep most of your money in cash, hold on, let me convert it back to cash. If you do that, then you're essentially being taxed 6 to 7% per year just for holding cash. That's because of inflation. And so what people, especially in retirement, will do is they'll look for fixed income assets. Assets like dividend stocks, which are stocks that just pay you money for holding them. Now, I love dividend stocks, and I look for ones that are between 2% if they're growers and 4% if they're showers. What I mean by that is anything that's in the 4 to 5% is basically the sweet spot. Anything more than that, and it becomes maybe a little bit too risky for me. And this is especially true for people that are older and that are retired. They don't want to take a lot of risk. But if that's the case, and inflation is 7%, if you're looking at the CPI data, then the real yield on those dividend stocks is actually negative. So you're actually losing money.
Så det han egentlig siger her, det er, at for at tjene penge på investeringer, så er man nødt til at overgå inflationen. Så det fungerer heldigvis meget simpelt, så hvis, lad os sige, der er en inflation på 10%, hvis du så kun får 7% på aktiemarkedet, så kan du bare trække de to tal fra hinanden, og så har du egentlig minus 3% i reelt afkast i din real return. Så det er altså vigtigt, at hvis inflationen er helt op og være 7, 8, 9, 10%, at så skal aktiemarkedet helst give mere end det, for at du tjener penge. Og det er også derfor, det tit kan være lidt mindre attraktivt i sådan nogle high inflation markeder, som vi for eksempel ser lige nu, at være investeret i obligationer. Fordi selvom at du får en fast rente på dem, så er det svært at finde obligationer, som har høje nok renter til at modsvare inflationen.
This does is it forces those people to look for higher risk investments. That's why we've had insane valuations in the IPO markets, in SPACs, in the metaverse, in NFTs, Bored Apes, CryptoPunks. Those are just exploding in value because investors are taking on more risk to stay ahead of that inflation curve. This is especially true for rich people like Kevin O'Leary. Everyone knows who this guy is, and as of right now, his portfolio is about 10% in crypto, which is insane because crypto is a risky, volatile asset. Why is that? Again, because he's looking for innovation, but mostly because he wants to make more money. If inflation continues to stay high, like in the 6 to 7% range, then I think investors will start to ditch some of those fixed income assets and low yielding bonds and commodities like gold and silver because it's actually costing investors money to hold on to them in favor of some of the higher risk assets in the crypto space. You have to remember that there was a period of time in the 1970s when inflation was so bad that there was virtually nothing you could put your money into to make money. You almost had to accept the fact that inflation was just going to steal your money. But now we have a choice. So as far as the stock market goes, and to give you a number on it, I think the S&P 500, in other words, the VOO ETF, is going to grow by about 7%. I'm going to be an optimist and just say that it's going to be at least 7%, which is what the stock market historically has done in a year. Now, last year, this number was closer to 30%, and it could do that again, but I will say that it's probably going to be at least 7%, or closer to that number. Now,
jeg vil så sige, han siger close to 30%. Her viser den så 27%, men det er så ikke justeret for inflation. Det her, det går jeg ud fra, at det bare er tallet 1 til 1.
Ja,
og de her 7% gennemsnitligt, som man plejer at tale om, at aktiemarkedet stiger årligt, det er justeret for inflation. Ja. Så det skal man lige være opmærksom på, at man ikke nødvendigvis kan sammenligne de der 27% med de gennemsnitlige 7. Ja. Så vil det mere være noget i stil med 10%, før det bliver justeret for inflation.
Unfortunately, I can't really pick which stocks are going to do the best, so I just buy VTI. VOO also works, and the top 5 holdings in this ETF are stocks like Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft. And I think tech will do incredibly well next year. But again, because I don't know which stocks specifically in the tech sector, I just buy this one stock and let it ride. So that's the stock.
Det er vildt at se, at Apple og Microsoft, de har næsten 7% hver i S&P 500. Ja.
Det er... Altså 2 selskaber udgør 13% af 500.
Så det viser virkelig, hvor meget læsset få virksomheder de kan trække. Og vi så jo også for nylig, at Apple de fik den højeste værdiansættelse nogensinde på over 3 billioner, altså over 3.000 milliarder dollars. Ja. Det er den første virksomhed i verdenshistorien til at blive så meget værd. Ja. Så de trækker altså en kæmpe del af læsset.
Market. Now let's talk about everyone else's favorite investment, the one that millennials will probably only own in the metaverse, and that of course is real estate. Full disclosure, I'm not a real estate agent, so don't listen to what I think about real estate, but I do have a film theory. The latest data on census.gov shows that in Q4 of last year, the median home sale price was $416,000, up from $369,000 at the beginning of the year. That's an increase of about 12.7%, which is a lot. when you consider that houses should grow by about 3% a year. That's 4 times the normal. I remember a few years ago, I was making $70,000 a year, and I was trying to buy a house in the $300,000 to $350,000 range. And then I remember reminding myself, Andre, what are you doing shopping for $300,000 homes? You can't afford this. Nowadays, the median household income is $71,000 a year, and homes are selling for $400,000. How long is that gonna last? I don't know. But in October of last year, 83% of properties that closed sold in less than a month. So if you listed your house for sale, it would have just been absorbed in less than 30 days, which is crazy. Again, how long is that going to last? Probably as long as inventory is low and rates are artificially suppressed. Now here's something else that's really interesting that I recently learned. You know how everyone's like, yeah, Papa Powell's gonna increase our interest rates, but he's not actually responsible for those rate increases as much as they are tracked by the yield on a 10-year treasury bond. So here's a way of thinking about it. You're a bank, right? You have lots of money. You want to invest that money, but you don't want to take a huge risk because you don't want to lose customer deposits. But you also want to make a profit because you're a bank. What do? You start lending that money out to credit-worthy people. So the question is, what rate would you lend at? And how would you even know? You would know by looking at the safest investment you can make right now, which is by parking your money into treasury bonds, which is basically lending money to the government. Now, right now, the yield on a 10-year treasury bond is 1.43%. So the question is, would you lend your money to people at 1.43%? No, of course you wouldn't.
Ja, hvad sker der?
Jeg tror bare, det er redigeringsglitch.
Ja, mærkeligt. Og det her det er jo så bare en 10-årig statsobligation, han snakker om over i USA, ja. Hvor renten så er 1,43%. Og det er jo... Ja, hvad vil du sige?
Når du vil sige lidt.
Ja, altså det er jo det, man sådan for eksempel sammenligner med, hvis du kigger på, det er jo sådan et, kan man sige, lidt mere sådan risikofrit investering. Og det er jo det, som jeg også har talt om i tidligere videoer, andre aktionsvideoer, at jo højere den rente er, jo mindre attraktivt bliver det at investere på aktiemarkedet, fordi på aktiemarkedet tager du en risiko. Der er ikke så meget risiko, når du investerer i obligationer udstedt af staten. Nej.
Man kalder den faktisk netop the risk-free rate, af den grund, som Daniel siger. Og det giver jo god mening, at jamen, hvis banken kan tjene flere penge på at låne penge ud til staten, end de kan på at låne penge ud til os, så låner de da bare penge ud til staten. Så renterne vil selvfølgelig følge de her obligationsrenter i en eller anden grad. Jeg synes, det er rigtig fedt, at han forklarer de her lidt mere dybe økonomiske ting. Man kan sige, indtil videre har vi fået at vide, at han estimerer aktiemarkedet til at stige, men det er det gennemsnitligt, han har gjort indtil videre.
Altså, jeg glæder mig til at høre hans $1 million investing strategy. Jeg synes ikke, han har fortalt en masse fin information, men jeg synes ikke, vi har hørt noget om strategi endnu. Der er også lidt tilbage.
Because you can make a guaranteed return on your money right now by giving it to the government. Now instead, you would want to charge people a premium for taking on the risk that those people might not pay you back. So that's why our yield or our interest rate on mortgages will never be below what the yield on a 10-year treasury bond is. I hope that makes sense. I know that's super complicated, but just press the J button on your keyboard to go back 10 seconds. It still probably won't make sense, I'm sorry. Now, as I'm sure you've already heard, Papa Powell wants to increase the interest rates 3 times. At least that's what 10 of the FOMC members have told us they would try to do this year. In theory, each increase should be about 0.25%. So if we have 3 of those, that is 0.75%. Now, here's what I learned about today that I didn't know about before. Whenever you increase the federal fund rate, which is what Papa Powell is trying to do, that does not guarantee an increase to the bond yield. The bond yield might go up and it might not. There's no guarantee because remember, the Federal Reserve doesn't set bond rates. It can only try to adjust them in the form of buying or selling them from the market. In this case, they want to sell bonds because by selling, you drop the price. And because price is inversely correlated to yield, whenever the price drops, the yield goes up, which is why in theory, the mortgage rate should also go up. It gets insanely complicated, that's not the point of this video, but a good way of thinking about it is that for every 1% increase to the bond yield, home prices should technically drop by about 10%. So if we translate that to the actual price of homes, then the home prices should go from the $416,900 they are today down to, best case scenario, 10% off of that, which would be about $375,200 or so. Now, short of a total crash, that's about as cheap as I think home prices will go this year, which means I'll be stuck buying homes in the metaverse. Now, here's the catch. Some investors believe that even if the worst happens and we increase the rate by a whopping 1% and the average mortgage interest goes from 3.2 up to 4.2, that will still be historically a low mortgage rate. And between...
Jeg vil lige sige, mortgage rates i USA, det er det, der svarer til noget, der minder om realkreditlån herhjemme. Ja. Så hvad er det, han siger? 3.3 to 4%?
Ja, de er noget dyrere.
Ja, de er betydeligt dyrere, end de er her i Danmark. Ja. Hvor man sagtens kan få 2% og 1,5% på de her lån.
1% nogle gange. 0,5% har været nede i. Og det er jo, når vi snakker 30-årigt obligationslån. Selvfølgelig kan man få endnu lavere på de her sådan flexlån. Men ja. Men
der skal man så også, netop med de her renter på realkreditlån, der er det vigtigt at være opmærksom på kursen, som han siger med, at der er den her inverse relation mellem kurs og rente. Så
modsatrettet korrelation. Eller negativ korrelation.
Er det det, man kalder det på dansk?
Måske.
Ja. Så man kan sige, for eksempel så vil et 2% forrentet lån ofte have en kurs tættere på 100 end et med 1,5%. Så selvom at det kan ligne, at 1,5% lånet er billigere, så hvis kursen på lånet er tilpas meget lavere, så er det ikke sikkert, at det alt i alt er billigere for dig. Så det er ikke så simpelt at vælge lån. Der skal man ligesom lige regne lidt mere på tingene, inden man kan tage en beslutning om det egentlig er 1,5 eller 2, der er det billigste. Ja. Eller lavere for den sags skyld. Men så begynder kurserne virkelig at være skidt.
All the demand from all the millennials and the low housing supply that even if millennials can't afford to buy the dip, then wealthy hedge funds and other international investors will scoop in to buy the dip. So even if the market drops, it'll still probably be absorbed relatively fast. So as far as my real estate prediction in terms of numbers goes, I think the median home price will go up by 7 to 10%. I think the median home price will go from $416,000 that it's at right now up to $446,000 to $458,000 on the high end. Beyond just the interest rate increase, it all depends on the jobs, the demand, and the wage increase, of course. I really wish it did, but I don't think real estate will slow down much this year. So now let's talk about crypto. Here we go again. I think Bitcoin will hit $100,000, just like I said last time. Don't listen to me. But this year, hopefully, we will get the approval of a spot ETF of Bitcoin. We have a futures ETF, but that's kind of lame, and that's not really helping us that much. But this year, I hope that Ethereum will get its own futures ETF, in which case it'll help Ethereum. But as far as Bitcoin goes, regulators like Gary Gensler are still rejecting those ETFs. If they approve it though, mom and dad, grandpa, grandma will be able to own Bitcoin indirectly through their mutual funds, their IRAs and 401ks, and trillions will flow into Bitcoin, in which case, within a few weeks, Bitcoin will hit $100,000, but a lot is riding on the spot ETF. Now,
ja, der var jo den her futures ETF, som han snakker om, som kom sidste år, som var sådan den første fond med Bitcoin, som blev tilgængelig for offentligheden. Og jeg har faktisk lavet en video om den, og forklaret, hvad de her futures er, men helt kort, så er det et spørgsmål om, at futures, det er en kontrakt, hvor du satser på en fremtidig pris, og så betaler fonden dig tilbage afhængigt af, om den stiger eller falder. Men du ejer sådan set ikke reelt noget Bitcoin. Så hvis man virkelig gerne vil eje Bitcoin, så er der brug for sådan en spot ETF, som han taler om, hvor et fonden reelt ejer Bitcoin, og ikke kun tilbyder de her futures. Men de er altså ikke tilladte at sælge til offentligheden endnu. Og det er jo så det, han gætter på, at de bliver. Og at der så også vil komme den første Ethereum med futures, og så forhåbentlig også en fond senere, hvor man kan eje Ethereum direkte igennem også.
Ja, så ved at man kan købe kryptovaluta direkte gennem en aktie, gennem en investeringsforening, gennem et værdipapir, så vil det gøre, at der er langt flere, der har muligheden for at købe ind i det. Og det vil gøre alt andet lige, at prisen kommer til at stige på kryptoer, når flere er interesseret i at købe det. Hvor for mange, der er det stadigvæk lidt nyt, det her med, at man skal have en wallet og så videre. Så det vil helt sikkert gøre, at der vil være langt flere, der putter penge ind i det marked.
As Ethereum goes, which is my second largest holding, a lot of it is riding on the migration to proof of stake, which is not guaranteed to happen. But if it happens, and the rate of creation on Ethereum gets cut by 90%, and it finally becomes a deflationary coin, we could see the price triple to $10,000 per coin, which is actually not as impossible as you might think, because remember, Ethereum has historically trailed Bitcoin by about a factor of 10. So if Bitcoin can hit $100,000 when the spot ETF gets approved, it's not impossible for Ethereum to hit 1/10 of that, which is $10,000. Now, of course, the opposite could happen, and we could go back down to the highs of the last cycle. That's why instead of trying to time it, I just buy a little bit at a time every single day. So now let me try to explain something that's kind of complicated and seemingly random, but I promise it ties into everything together.
Det var der det kom. Det var Millionær Strategi.
Ja.
Det er forskellen på at være dollarmillionær og ikke at være det, det er, at han investerer hver dag, og vi bliver nødt til at nøjes med at investere hver måned. Ja. Men jeg er helt fan af strategien, i stedet for at forsøge at se på price charts og gætte på, hvornår bitcoin er lav og høj og sådan noget. Så det her med at få dollar cost averaget sig ind, så kan man sige, at dagligt er jo selvfølgelig det optimale, men eftersom det koster vekslingsgebyr at veksle fra danske kroner til euro eller dollars og sådan noget, så er det mere realistisk at gøre det lidt sjældnere, når man ikke sådan har flere tusind at sætte ind hver eneste dag. Ja.
Random, but I promise it ties into everything together, called the inverted yield curve. So let me just quickly try to explain what an inverted yield curve means, because it's important in that it's been somewhat of a reliable predictor for recessions in the past. I'm gonna put you to sleep in this next part, but I'll do my best not to. So we have different kinds of bonds that mature at different stages. For example, we have 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year, 20-year, and 30-year bonds. If you buy a bond from the Treasury that matures in 2 years, the interest rate that it'll pay you is lower than if you were to buy a bond that matures in 30 years. That makes sense because if you were to lock up your money with the government for 30 years, you're taking on more risk, because who has any idea what's gonna happen in 30 years? We don't know. We might know in 2, but not in 30. So the higher the risk, the higher the reward. In a normal yield curve, the graph just looks like an ascending left to right diagonal line. Now this tells investors that everything is normal, the economy is expanding, everything is growing, everything is perfectly fine. But if this curve inverts and we get a sloping downward curve, that means that the shorter term bonds will yield a higher interest than the long-term ones. And this can signal to investors that, wait a minute, things are scary, we have no idea what's going to happen, and so investors start to hold on to their money. The capital velocity slows down, people become pessimistic, and this could signal to investors that a coming recession is going to happen. It's predicted 9 of the recessions that have happened since 1955. In the year 2021, the yield curve flattened, and now we're expecting that the recovery is going to be slower, and we're expecting inflation to be higher. So investors are pessimistic, which is why that curve is kind of flattened, and some people are worried that if we inflect to the negative, downward, so it inverts, that could signal to investors again that another recession is coming. But one thing I do want to get out of the way is that right now the yield curve is not telling us that there will be a recession. It's just something to pay attention to. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to have a wonderful day. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Go grab up to $250 worth of free Bitcoin with this block.
Altså, jeg er ikke helt sikker på, at jeg har fået svaret på, hvordan han investerer i 2022. Altså jo, han sagde, at han investerer i aktier og krypto og
han sagde,
ejendomme.
Han købte Bitcoin og Ethereum hver dag.
Ja, men det var ikke så meget indsigt.
Nej, det var ikke så konkret, men jeg tror, pointen er, at han sælger ikke sine ting. Han køber mere. Jeg ved ikke, om han køber real estate. Det kunne jeg ikke finde
Nej, altså faktisk, hvis vi lige tager det punkt for så aktier, der sagde han jo faktisk også, at han går meget op i udbytte. Han viste os alle hans udbytteaktier. Det ved man, Andrei Jikh, han har meget udbytte. Og så sagde han faktisk ordret, at han ikke køber enkelte aktier. Det sagde han lidt senere. Og han bare købte de der VTOO og VT et eller andet, som er S&P 500. Og ja, jeg tror primært, det er S&P 500, og så måske noget globalt også, lidt mindre. Altså køber nogle indeksfonde, der er billige for Vanguard. Ja. Eller ETF'er, som det hedder. Og jeg mener faktisk også, at dengang han startede kanalen, der var han mere fokuseret på udbytteaktier, end han er nu. Ja. Og det er simpelthen fordi, han er røget op i en helt anden tax bracket. Han tjener så mange penge nu, at han er ikke nødvendigvis, det er ikke nødvendigvis det optimale for ham at få tvunget udbetalinger ud i form af udbytte, i forhold til at optimere sin skat og sådan noget. Så jeg tror, at ja, han køber passive indeksfonde, og så køber han regelmæssigt op i krypto. Ja. Så ofte han i virkeligheden kan. Hvilket jeg synes virker som en rigtig fornuftig strategi. Ja. Det minder utrolig meget om min egen, bare på EPO. Ja, lige gange 10 eller et eller andet. Så det samme her. Primært køber op i indeksfonde, køber også løbende op i både kryptoer og indeksfonde. Real estate, det fik vi ikke så meget. Så lidt i tvivl om, han investerer i det eller ej. Det er han faktisk ikke særlig kendt for, men det er han derimod den næste person, som vi skal se på den anden kanal. Link her under kommentarfeltet. Der skal vi prøve at vende på Graham Stephan, som også er jo en af de allerstørste inden for det her område i USA. Person, der har inspireret mig personligt meget til at komme i gang med dagens pengetips, som både investerer også i ejendomme, krypto og aktier. Så skal vi prøve at se hans investeringsplan og se, om han er måske lidt mere konkret i forhold til, hvad han kommer til at investere i.
Tak fordi I kiggede med.
Vi ses.